Welcome to Flight Path. My name is Simon, and we are talking about the battlefield of Waterloo, and we've got to the stage of the last attack of Napoleon up this slope here on the western side of the battlefield. The exact circumstances of this attack is disputed over the years. It's not clear sometimes what formation was being used and who fought. There was some of the first foot guard were given later the title of grenadiers because they believed they fought the grenadiers, but it's actually possible they fought the chasseurs instead. There's an argument about who repulsed who, but the attack basically occurs over a reasonably long time over a reasonably wide front that all possibilities could be true. But there was definitely a lot of arguments in the United Services magazine afterwards about who did what at this point. But remember, the smoke is thick, visibility is probably less than 200 yards. Mercer, who I believe was over on this side here, was so concerned, preoccupied with being shelled by artillery over this side, that he fails to notice that he's even involved in the final throes of the battle. And as we mentioned in previous episodes as well, Kincaid of the 95th Rifles, he was in a sort of a skirmishing fight in this area around here, and he had a poor visibility, and he was unaware that the old Garde had even been repulsed. I don't think he even heard Wellington's order for a general advance. The advance itself, it's believed that Napoleon began it or would lead it, and he would lead it from, it's believed, somewhere in this area here. They start to move on. Now, again, there's questions about the direction, but at some point along here, the command of the Old Guard is transferred from Napoleon to Ney. And then they talk about, well, why is there different directions that rather than moving straight up here, which you could argue they could have done because Le Haisson was now in their control. This was also some of the weaker troops in this area here. Why didn't he do that? Well, we know that this was a sunken lane, quite a steep one, so they were probably trying to come in at this angle from here onwards. But Ney leads them in a sort of a northwest direction rather than a north direction. So we know that at least 5 battalions of Old Garde moved up here. In this fighting as well, we believe Ney has another horse shot from him, so he then continues the battle on foot. And from around about 200 yards, there's this sort of horseshoe of Allied artillery, essentially, that are firing down on the Old Guard in this area here. Now, there's reports that the 1st Battalion of the 3rd Regiment of Grenadiers, and they actually have some success. They overrun some Brunswickers. But essentially, though, what we're talking about here is that even at this time, the Old Guard are outnumbered. So yes, the confusion is so great at this point, and the visibility is so poor that several officers claimed afterwards that their columns in front of them were the ones to break. That they should have the principal credit for the defeat of the Imperial Guard. But it seems to have sort of happened all at the same time, and then there's a sort of a general panic occurs. And so let's. There's a good description here from Captain Powell, and he was in this area. He was in part of the Foot Guards, and they were attacked, believed to be attacked by the 1st and 2nd battalions of the 3rd Regiment of Chasseurs. They were behind, he says, behind the banks of a road, which is this road here. And he says without this road, every creature must have perished. Suddenly the fire increased. Suddenly the fire ceased, and as the smoke cleared away, a most superb sight opened on us. A close column of grenadiers who were ascending the rise opposed the charge, shouting "Vive l'Empereur!" They continued to advance until about 50 to 60 yards in our front, and when the brigade, and then the brigade is ordered to stand up. So it suggests here that they're lying down here, and the initial fire is the artillery firing over the heads of the Old Guard, and the Old Guard are essentially down in this valley here. Well, not really a valley, but you know what I mean. And they're coming up this slope. And when they get to the top here, it's believed that the Wellington himself said, "Up, guards, ready." And so Powell carries on and says, whether it was from the sudden and unexpected appearance of a corps so near to them, and I don't think he means a corps, I think he means battalion, but which must have seemed as if starting out of the ground, or tremendously heavy fire we threw into them, like the Guard, who had never before failed an attack, suddenly stopped, and in less than a minute, about 300 of these Guard were down, and they now begin to waver, and several of the rear divisions begin to draw out as if to deploy. So it sounds like they come up to 60 yards in column formation, and then they're trying to deploy into a line. The only chance of success for the ranks of the French to press forward, but the officers of the shows have chosen instead to try to form them into line and meet them with fire. So that's probably one of the mistakes. They should have just carried on, possibly, but they tried to move it into a line, and the British are just pouring fire into them, and as they try to reform, increasing the amount of confusion, and then with the waiver, Wellington orders a charge, and essentially the French are outnumbered and they're pushed back, he says, with hand-to-hand combat and in the direction of the orchard at Hougoumont. Now that would be essentially this area here, which is below us now. And so we get the shouts of La Garde Recule, and it echoes along the front, and it triggers a wholesale withdrawal, it's mentioned here, and signalling the battle is lost. Now, I don't know how it happens, or if it starts on this side here, but Alex and Donzela's divisions see the Guard fall back across the rear, and they withdraw, which and then that brings them the whole sort of front down like a house of cards. And this is the point where I think Duret's infantry, they're supposed to be over here. They're meeting fresh troops, and the news gets through again, probably shouts, screams, whatever. It's that the news is that these troops are not Grouchy, they are Prussians, and so that triggers a wave of retreat. There's cries of "Nous sommes trahis." This is basically we are what's the word? Trahis? Is it like we are we have been betrayed? I think. Let me have a look. Yeah, so we are deceived. We are betrayed, essentially. Basically save yourselves. And so you get this sort of ripple and cascade effect going on the French army. La Garde Recule, we are deceived. You know, it's all happening right now. The attacks late in the, so this is a letter from Lieutenant Leslie. He's of the 79th Cameroon Highlanders. There's no date on this letter, but he says the attack was late in the day, and we had not long regained our position when, at the period to which you allude, the enemy in front of us seemed moving forward a fresh column of simultaneous attacks that on the right of our line. This was checked by the appearance of the Prussians breaking from the wood on the left of our position. So that seems to suggest, from his point of view, that the trigger for this retreat is actually a Prussian presence on the left. This is a guy, Major Brown. He was of the 40th Regiment, and he wrote a letter in 1835. And he said that the Prussian army had appeared about an hour previous to our final advance to the hedge, which is the time that they came up to this hedge here to meet the French attack. They were coming from the woods some considerable distance to our left of our position, so presumably from over here, but he says they were nearer to the French and were rapidly advancing along the plain, having previously attacked, and were then in the act of turning the enemy's right. This, I presume, was the occasion for the confusion which was at that time so manifest in the enemy's lines and amongst several of his divisions, and he says, and which the Duke of Wellington so promptly took advantage of. So that suggests that if you're on this side of the battlefield in this area here, the reason for the French retreating is because of the Prussians arriving on the left. But if you're on this side of the battlefield, what you're getting is that the surprise standing up of the foot guards, piling in of musketry into the old Garde, is making them, the old Garde, recule and go back. So what I think you're getting is a combination of the two. You're getting this sort of, one side is you've got the Garde Recule. The other side of it goes, we have been deceived, and it's all sort of rippling along the French lines in some sort of fashion. And so when you get to this point here, and you're getting infantry fired into you by outnumbered, and then you're looking right, and people are pulling back on this side, and you're just kind of like, we're not going to be able to do this on our own, and we pull back. So Victor Hugo, at this point, he says, this is in Les Miserables, a disbanding army is a thaw. The whole bends, cracks, snaps, floats, rolls, falls, crashes, hurries, plunges. It's a mysterious disintegration. And I think that really sums up the way that this the French army just collapses. Is it one thing or another? Does the old guard on this side know anything about the advance of the Prussians on the other side? It's all essentially here about individual battles going on all along this line here, and so you have to give Wellington credit, and it goes all the way back to the decision to fight the battle here. The topography, as I say, the whole point of this channel is topography and distances. This is the reason why the French essentially lose on this day, because of the shape of the ground here. And it was chosen by Wellington in 1814 as a place to fight a battle. Less than 15 minutes later, Wellington rides to the top of the ridge. This is after the old guard have gone back. He comes up to the top of this ridge, and in somewhere around here, he will lift his hat into the air, and he waves it in the air as a signal for a general advance. And essentially, any attack, any formation that was still fit, was to join in the advance. And Vivian and Vandeleur's cavalry, who remember had to come back across from the left and were sitting in the rear here, they will take up the vanguard of the chase down into the valley. Fraser, Augustus Fraser, he was said he had seen nothing like that moment. The sky literally darkened with smoke, the sun just going down, and which we had not for some hours broken through the gloom of the day, the indescribable shouts of thousands, where it was impossible to distinguish between friend and foe. Every man's arm seemed to be raised against that of every other. Suddenly, after the mingled mass had ebbed and flowed, the enemy began to yield, and the cheerings and English huzzas announced the day must be ours. And Kincaid is over here. He's on the left-hand side of the line. He's so immersed in smoke, and he doesn't know what this cheering means. And the movement carried us clear of the smoke and to people who had been in for so many minutes enveloped in darkness in the midst of destruction, and naturally anxious about the result of the day. The scene which now met the eye conveyed a feeling of a most exquisite gratification that can be conceived. It was a fine summer's evening just before sunset, and the French were flying in one confused mass, and British lines were seen essentially in close pursuit, in admirable order, as far as the eye could reach to the right, while the plain to our left was filled with Prussians. So he's in this area here, somewhere around here, and he's looking out, and he can see essentially an advancing army on one side, And on the left, he says this section here is just full of Prussians. Now, what time do we think this is? Well, we believe it's somewhere around 8 o'clock in the evening that this occurs. And at the same time, we got to remember the Prussians have taken back Plancenoit. Remember that? We did that in the previous stream. It's around about 8 o'clock, I think. Yeah, it's something like 10 past 8. There's reports it could be 10 past 8 that the actual order to advance occurs. Vivian's brigade is moved forward in this area here, riding on. And Vivian, by the way, he describes this. He says he wrote a letter to his wife on the 23rd of June. And he said, "No words can give an idea of how a man escaped it to me is a miracle. We every instant expecting through the smoke to see the enemy appearing under our noses, and for the smoke was literally so thick that we could not see 10 yards off. But at last began to find that the shots did not come so thick, and I discovered that the enemy were, instead of advancing to gain our position, retrograding on theirs. The moment of attack was arrived and received orders to advance." So he's obviously back here. He can feel the weight of arms coming over this ridge. And he says, as you say, you can imagine it just sort of depleting, and then he's then ordered forwards. He rides along the line, he says, to Colborne, which is on this side here. But essentially comes down into this area in this way. Actually, Colborne is advised by Clinton, I think it is. He's shouted, "Go on, Colborne, go on." He said, "They won't stand. Don't give them the chance to rally." Sorry, that was Vivian's shouting to Colborne, who was in this area here. If I remember, they were the ones firing on the flank. Major Francis Hepburn, he was of the 2nd Battalion of the 3rd Foot Guards. He wrote in 1834, "During this time I knew nothing of what was passing elsewhere. In about an hour or more after the resumption of our post, a staff officer came from the left at full gallop with orders for an immediate advance, stating that the whole army were moving on to the charge. We passed the hedge and moved upon the troops in the cornfield, who retired in no order and almost without firing." He was essentially over here in defending Hougoumont. And essentially what happens is Vivian starts to do these sort of controlled charges in this area. The enemies are broken and the cavalry are sent out essentially to stop these guys from reforming. And if they're going to retire, then make them rout off the battlefield itself. Captain Barton, he was of the 12th Light Dragoons. He says the scene here was terrific. From the great number of killed and wounded, bodies were lying so close to each other that our horses could scarcely advance without trampling on them, and a great many were wounded in the fetlocks from the bayonets and other weapons that were scattered about in the field. So he's describing there that the actual horses were getting injured by the equipment in this area. He mentions the grenadiers as cheval of the Imperial Guard. They formed into a dense column and appeared to take little notice of our advance. They literally just walked from the field in a most majestic manner. There's talk here. There's around about this time the Prussians actually managed to push through Place Noire, and they would sweep onto the Genappe Road. And it would actually, so I think they come around this side here, and we're talking around about where the Belle Alliance was. And actually there's confusion here where some of the Allied cavalry actually engage each other. And we're talking a possible meet-up point was La Belle Alliance. That sounds a little bit too contrived. People kind of consensus is it's probably more down the road here, somewhere in this area, that they actually met up. And to give Wellington his due, now there's a whole argument about what happens about this story. He does write in his Waterloo dispatch that was written a couple of days after this battle to say, I should not do justice to my own feelings or to Marshal Blucher and the Prussian army if I did not attribute the successful result of this arduous day to the cordial and timely assistance I received from them. And that, I think, we will just end this stream at this point. And when we come back, we will discuss in the next stream the pursuit of the French back along this road here towards back to Paris. And we'll look into the routes that were taken and some of the politics involved as they essentially chase Napoleon off and out of Belgium. Is it the end of the French army? I mean, at the end of the day, we still got to talk about Grouchy, and Grouchy's got over 33,000 men at Wavre, and he's fighting Thielman, so we'll look into that battle. And then we'll discuss whether it would have been possible for Napoleon to have put up some sort of defense between here and Paris. So I'd like to thank everybody for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this talk. I'm glad that we now managed to get to the battlefield of Waterloo. I've been breaking these up into little parts that are going on to YouTube, so you can just have to watch them in little 20-minute snippets. And we're well over like 90 episodes now of that, so it's been a huge amount of work involved, and I would really appreciate it that a like is the compensation I get for that amount of work. But we will come back in the next stream, and we'll continue the journey, and we're essentially going to finish this in St Helena. And just to prepare you as well for the next subject, it's likely to be the Falklands War. So if you want to do your homework on that, you can start reading some excellent books out there on that subject. So with that, then I would like to say thank you, and hope you all have a lovely day, and I'll see you in the next one.